Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about all of the games that we just hadn't had a chance to get to. Want to make sure you guys have a full look at the college football slate because no game doesn't matter. We can talk about how, some games are more important, some games have CFP implications, some don't. I don't much care. Football is football, and there's plenty of good football regardless of what you're playing for at the end of the year. But let's get into my best bets as we head into the Week 11 slate. There's quite a few that I like, maybe a little bit too much on here, and you'll only understand that if you know what the betting world is about. But there's some on here I feel almost too confident about. But let's go ahead and jump into this. And the first game on here, a little bit more under the radar, but I love Minnesota -6 at Rutgers. I think this is one of those games where you have one team just heading perfectly in the right direction. Minnesota has won 4 straight. Max Brosmer has not turned the ball over in those games. They've been playing really, really well offensively, have been able to run the game in some game or run the ball in some games, been more pass heavy in others. They've been a really, really complete team, and frankly, you take out that loss in the first week of the season to UNC. This is a 7-2 team and looking very, very good as they head forward to the end of the season. And then on the other side, you got a Rutgers team that has fallen like a stone. And a lot of the reason is the injuries that have come in all across that team. So they've lost 4 straight. And they're trying to find a way to just get that one big win on the season. This would be a great place to do it. But I think it's going to be a lot like the Maryland game for Max Brosmer. I think there's going to be a number of openings on the back end of this Rutgers defense. I think it's just going to be way too much offensively for Rutgers to keep up. So I think there could be some points back and forth, maybe a little bit of a fun kind of a clash of styles with Rutgers a little bit more run heavy. But at the end of the day, I think Minnesota gets this one done. I think 6 is being a little bit generous to a lot of the people out there, frankly. I'm going to go out on a limb and take Army. It sounds a little bit crazy, and it's one of those things where it started at 6.5, it's fallen all the way down to 4. Bryson Daly's probably not going in this game, and I don't care. I'll be totally honest with you. I know this sounds a little bit crazy, but North Texas, I bet that against them in the Tulane game. Now, they backdoor covered on me, but at the end of the day, I did bet against them in the Tulane game because of the run game that Tulane has. They give up 297 yards on the ground to Tulane. They're probably going to give up more than that on the ground to Army this upcoming weekend. I think Kanye Udo is going to be an absolute problem, and I think while North Texas can score, they absolutely are going to have the ability to stick around with this Army team for quite some time. One stop from Army totally changes this game, because frankly, I don't think North Texas is going to be able to stop Army very consistently, and frankly, I also think that when you get into the second half of this game, there's no way North Texas is going to be able to stop them. The physicality of this Army team is just going to overwhelm North Texas, and at the end of the day, it could be a little bit ugly. It could take a long time to get there. I think Army at least wins this game by 1 touchdown and maybe even by more, with Kanye Udo going over 200 yards rushing. Let's just put that out there just for fun. But Michigan, Indiana, I like the under 49.5 in this game. This is one of those games where it feels like everyone is immediately looking to take the over on Indiana, mainly team total, but at the end of the day, a lot of people love that over when you're playing an Indiana game, and it's proven to be the case in a lot of different respects. The thing is, this is one of those games that just strikes me as one that's going to get stuck in the mud for a quarter and a half. There's going to be a lot of punts. There's going to be a couple of mistakes. There's going to be just pretty monotonous football for the first 20-25 minutes of game time. And then I think things start to open up, particularly for Indiana, but I do think it opens up for Michigan just a little bit as well. I think the biggest thing here is Indiana is more than equipped to slow the run game for Michigan. And if Michigan is going to have that happen, relying on Davis Warren to score you 20, 25, 28 points, probably not going to happen all that well, especially against Indiana's defense. And then on the other side for Indiana, explosive offense, a really, really dangerous offense, and no doubt about that. I think the game plan and the approach from Michigan is going to be the real trouble. I think Indiana is going to have to be a little bit better at the quick passes, just kind of working their way downfield, taking the 5 yards, taking the 5 yards after that, and then continue moving forward. So it's going to be one of those that I just think gets caught in the mud for the first half of the game, possibly opens up in the second, but doesn't quite get to that 50 number that it needs to hit that over. Then we got Iowa State -3 against Kansas State. Kansas, excuse me. This is one of those spots where it feels like a lot of people are going Kansas direction. It feels like a lot of people are pushing towards, possibly this is a sleepy spot for Iowa State. Kansas has been playing some better football thus far, and I totally get all of that. That makes total sense, and it's definitely something that will play a part into this game. I think this line is a little bit of an overreaction, one way or the other, or really both ways, if I'm being totally honest. I think Iowa State last week against Texas Tech did not play their best game. I also think it's one of those games that looked, at least to me, as a little bit more of a blip than what is to come. And then for Kansas, I feel kind of the same way. I don't necessarily think they're a team that is going to push a lot of these teams to the brink the same way they did Kansas State last week. So it is going to be one of those interesting games, and we'll see what happens. But the big thing for me is Kansas is one of the worst run defenses in the entire country. If Carson Hansen and Abu Sama can get rolling downhill, wrap it up. There's nothing that Kansas is going to be able to do to counter, and more than anything else, Jalen Daniels has been great of late. You get a couple of defenses that can force a couple of mistakes from him. This thing opens up in a hurry, and you get at least a 7-point win in this one. Then we got BYU, Utah under 40.5, and this line is very low, so it's making me a little bit nervous. But at the end of the day, this one's going to be a fight. It's going to be an absolute rock fight back and forth. It is going to be two teams that are really just scratching and clawing for any yard that they can get. But at the end of the day, I think BYU heading up to Salt Lake is going to be a tough battle. But on top of that, you're playing a defense that can kind of flip some of that turnover luck that BYU has been able to get this year. You know, maybe that defense can force a couple of turnovers from Jake Retzlaff in this offense, and then you're facing a little bit of a conundrum as you head down the stretch of this game. So it's going to be really interesting to watch this unfold. And on the for the Utah defense, they have not, the Utah offense has not topped 20 points since they played the Oklahoma State game all the way back in September 21st. They are not going to be able to score. This is probably the best defense they've faced since then, and it's going to be an absolute nightmare to deal with. So I don't think it's going to be one of those games where Utah's able to get really much of anything getting going. Frankly, would not be surprised if they left this game with 13 points. And then for BYU, I just think there's going to be a couple of mistakes in there. I don't think it's going to be necessarily a bad performance or anything, but I do think BYU gets the win. I just think it could be like 6-0 at halftime, and then we're trying to figure out how to get offense going in the second half. The other side, another over that I like in this weekend is South Carolina Vanderbilt, and this is one that I went back and forth on. I thought about doing the under, I thought about doing the over, probably flipped back a number 3 times before I finally made this decision, but at the end of the day, I do think you're in a kind of an interesting spot with South Carolina because I think this offense has been a little bit underrated throughout the year. I guess the best way to put it. I think Lenora Sellers' injury, I think Rocket Sanders' injury, I think just playing a lot of the teams that they've played and having a couple of the calls that have gone the way that they have gone has kind of taken away from what has been a really, really impressive offensive year for this team. And if Lenora Sellers is turning the corner that it looked like he was last weekend, it's going to be really hard to stop this offense if you're Vanderbilt. And then on the other side, Vanderbilt doesn't have to do a ton in this game. South Carolina is a more aggressive defense. They have better guys on the front. The reality is the Vanderbilt offense is so good at misdirection. It's so good at keeping guys flat-footed that a lot of that stuff is neutralized, at least a little bit. A lot of that stuff is kept at bay a little bit better than maybe A&M was able to last week. So I think it's one of those games where South Carolina, I do think South Carolina wins. I think they probably do a good bit of the heavy lifting here, but at the end of the day, I think Vandy's one of those teams that they see you score and they immediately just say, we're going to go down and score. One way or the other, we're going to find a way to put 7 points on the board. So I think it trades just a little bit, but I like South Carolina to win, and I really like Lenora Sellers to have another big-time game. Then we got Georgia Ole Miss, and frankly, I use this picture because I'm shocked that I hadn't used it before. It is absolutely so cool, but just wanted to throw that out there. But I do like the under in this game. As cool as that catch is, I do like the defense to win those battles on Saturday because this is one where I just think it's one of those games you have an absolute stalemate at the line of scrimmage positions. You have a D-line in Georgia that is going to be aggressive, that is going to attack against an offensive line for Ole Miss that is good, is not necessarily great, is not necessarily elite. I think they're going to get after him in this one. And then on the other side, I like the UGA offense. I like the UGA O-line, and I think they're more than capable of getting push. This is an elite defensive line on the other side. If you're going to move Walter Nolan, you're going to have to do it pretty consistently, and no one's able to do that pretty consistently. So I really think the run games get pretty bogged down. The quarterbacks have to make all the plays in the world, and I think a couple of mistakes will come. I do think Carson Beck will make some mistakes. I think Ole Miss run game will just not be very good in this game. I'm expecting a little bit of a slow start from both parties, and then maybe it'll open up a little bit, but not to get to 55 points in this one. So I'll take the under there. Definitely one where I'm a little bit on the fence, but I think these defenses are going to come to play, and especially Georgia's is really going to get after Ole Miss. And then Alabama LSU, I'll flip back over to over. I do think they're going to get to 58.5 to get the over here, and I want points in Baton Rouge, and I think that's what we're going to get this weekend in Baton Rouge. There's going to be really, really fun to watch, and it's a game where it feels like neither defense is really equipped to handle what's on the other side, at least from the way that they like to play. You know, with Alabama, with Jalen Milroe, if he's running the ball, it's an absolute nightmare to deal with. LSU figured that out with Marcel Reed. Well, it's going to be a little bit tougher to corral number 4 than it was to corral Marcel Reed, just being totally honest. And then on the other side, Kane Womack, Alabama, the way they play defense is aggression. The way they play defense is man coverage on the back end, and then we're going to rush 5, 6 guys. You want to do that to Garrett Nussmeier, he is going to tear you to pieces. That's just who he is. He absolutely loves man coverage. He absolutely loves when teams come with pressure because he gets the ball out quickly, he puts it on target, and he lets his guys go to work. So there's a number of different ways that this game could go, but the reality is I think it's just one of those where the defensive game plans, the defensive approach for both teams play right into what these offenses want to do. So I think there's going to be a lot of points in. I think we could have a downright classic, frankly, in Baton Rouge this upcoming weekend. But let's take our last break here, and we'll actually continue talking about LSU on the other side because got a little bit of drama around Bryce Underwood, the number 1 quarterback in this upcoming class. You also have a little bit of drama around Baton Rouge in that LSU game, Alabama game. So we'll break it down all right after this, so stick with us.